All right, we are going to get started. My name is Mary Beth Gassman, and I am a professor at Rutgers University, and I also serve as the executive director of the Rutgers Center for Minority Serving Institutions. Sorry, and I say that every day nonstop, and then I can't say it today. We are the sponsor of this event, proud sponsor. I am thrilled to have one of our visiting scholars, Gabe Bermia, here with us, along with an amazing panel, and he will introduce the panel. He is going to be talking about insights from a new report that was just published by the Rutgers Center for Minority Serving Institutions, which we will drop in the chat a little bit later. And we will also be having a wonderful panel discussion. So today's event is titled Confianza, Academic Advising Insights from Hispanic Serving Institutions. We're excited to be sponsoring this event during Hispanic Serving Institution Week at the White House, and we are happy to have you all here. Just so that you know, you can put your questions in the Q&A. We have plenty of time at the end of the session to answer your questions, and Gabe and our panel, they're very excited to answer your questions, so please put them in there. Gabe, I am going to hand things over to you, and very excited to listen to what you have to say today.
Thank you, Mary Beth. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for that kind introduction. Very excited to be here with you all today. I want to take this moment to introduce our panelists so that you know who the experts are in the field and who are here to share with us their insights, their experiences, and their thoughts on not only today's report and presentation, but also just overall the experiences and insights that they have of academic advising at Hispanic serving institutions. I'd like to first introduce Dr. John Vasquez, who currently serves as the Executive Director of Graduate Studies and Research at Colorado State University, Pueblo. Thank you, Dr. Vasquez, for being with us today. We also have Ms. Lina Asta-Stostivitu, who is a doctoral candidate at National University, who is an active member of the academic advising community with NACADA, as well as one of the scholarly members committees of our Hispanic and Latin academic advising community with NACADA. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we have Dr. Nicole Gonzalez, who currently serves as the director of the Advising Resource Center at the University of Arizona. We're so grateful for all of y'all joining us today. We can't wait to begin the conversation with you at the top of the hour. As a friendly reminder, as Dr. Gassman mentioned, we do have a Q&A portion scheduled for this webinar today. So again, if you have questions throughout today's webinar, please feel free to put them in the Q&A section of your little tab at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we'll be happy to follow up and address those questions as they come up. So without further ado, I figure let's go on in and we can dive into the report that we have to share with you all today. So Giselle, please, next. You can't begin talking about HSIs without first discussing Latino enrollment in higher education. For the last 20 years, Latino enrollment in higher education has increased substantially, 131%. Today, Latino enrollment is 3.6 million, representing about 1 in 5 students in U.S. higher education today. Comes as no surprise that with the rise of Latinos in higher education, you also see the academic advising community investing in research and scholarship focused around understanding the advising experiences of Latino students. Even going as far as to most recently establish a new academic advising community within NACADA, the Hispanic and Latin Student Success Academic Advising Community. Today, we now know that Latinos represent 1 in 5 and continue to increase their enrollment in higher education. Next, please. This Latino enrollment also has research that really focuses on 4 major areas. One, we see Latino research focusing on the negative experiences. In 2014, we saw a study, and in 2010, that Latino students report academic advising as a negative experience with their academic advisors. In response, we saw academic advising really shift their focus on Latinos-related academic advising as one of the most critical and important services. And thus, institutions saw this disconnect and started making more intentional investments in their academic advising experiences. As a result, you see more culturally responsive strategies positively impacting Latino students in the advising space. In return, and as an outcome, you start seeing academic advising linked to Latino student success in higher education. With that, you begin just to see just how Latinos are a unit of analysis within the advising literature. Next, please. With this rise of Latinos, you also see a parallel increase of Hispanic serving institutions. We see this rise of HSIs, which are accredited degree granting public or private nonprofit institutions of higher ed, with 25% or more total Hispanic FTE student enrollment. Today, there are 600 HSIs in the US, enrolling 63% of the Latino undergraduate population, yet representing only 20% of colleges and universities. This increase has also prompted researchers to begin studying HSIs as a field of expertise and studies. Next, please. The focus of HSIs within higher education research has really been in four significant areas. One, defining, identifying, and describing HSIs through their political as well as racialized constructs. We also see HSIs being deconstructed, trying to understand what it means to be an HSI and to serve rather than to enroll Latino students. Additionally, we see research emerging on understanding HSI enrollment, HSI retention, completion, and post-completion success efforts. We also see research focusing on Title V funds, and of course, how other institutions might learn from what HSIs are doing to inform their strategies and practice. Finally, we also see HSIs really looking into research, really studying into HSI strategies and practices that serve Latino students while serving all, and demonstrating their impact on Latino student success within their institutions. Next, please. However, the intersect of advising and HSIs has really been quite limited in scope when it comes to the research. Today, as like the most recently, the past couple of years, we start seeing emerging scholarship on HSIs and academic advising. For example, we see HSIs are continually evaluating the effectiveness of their academic advising programs to ensure that they are positively influencing student success and leveraging data to inform the evolution of the advising experience for their students. We also see that HSIs are placing greater value on academic advisors who come equipped with intercultural communication skills, a commitment to anti-racism, as well as strong cultural competencies. We also see within the research, HSI's academic advisors training often emphasizing informational and technological competencies as they prepare their academic advisors to serve their students. Yet they frequently overlook critical areas such as the conceptual understanding of academic advising and training in anti-racism practices and competencies. And then fourth, we also see the responsibilities of academic advisors at HSIs encompassing a wide range of duties. For example, we know that HSI advisors are not only recruiting and registering students, they're also offering areas of coaching and development, intervention and support, teaching and learning, service to the campus community, career and educational development, and the wellness and well-being of their students. These 7 critical areas reflect the multiple levels of work and function that academic advisors have at MSIs as well as HSIs. Next slide, please. HSIs in advising has also featured areas of understanding how HSIs implement culturally relevant academic advising practices to effectively support their students throughout their educational journey. Excellency in Education has an extremely well-documented experience tracking these culturally relevant practices through their Growing What Works database for those who might be interested. Additionally, we know that HSI leadership has recognized the value of advising as a critical strategy, not just a practice, but a strategy for achieving an institution's student success goals, and actively seek ways to find investments in and enhance this vital area for student success. We also see HSIs engaging academic advisors in professional development. That, to echo some of those anti-racism competencies, emphasizing cultural humility, using the use of micro-affirmations, addressing microaggressions, and fostering that sense of belonging and enhancing academic outcomes for their students. These come as recommendations from a most recent study in 2020. And then finally, but not least, we also see the value that HSIs place on intrusive advising because it often effectively promotes not only continuous term-to-term enrollment, but it also promotes student success in the long term. We also see that there is a value for HSIs in aligning the ethnicity of an academic advisor with that of their advisees, as that has been found to significantly enhance the perceived value of the academic advising experience for their students. These studies are, again, within the last 5 years or so, and present an opportunity for us to really dive deeper into what HSIs are doing when it comes to their academic advising efforts. Next, please. This opportunity is, while we know that the rise of Latino enrollment has ignited research in the advising community, the same was not necessarily true for HSIs. The HSI identity of an institution was often not the unit of analysis within these works, which presents us opportunity to learn more and dig deeper. Next slide, please. The research opportunity we have before us is within HSIs, with HSIs enrolling 63% of Latino undergraduates. This plays a pivotal role, acknowledging that HSIs play a pivotal role in guiding the substantial majority of Latino students towards academic success and beyond. Despite this critical responsibility, there remains a significant gap in understanding the advising practices and strategies employed by these institutions at the organizational level. Hence today's study and report. Next slide, please. Our report and our study is designed around a qualitative research approach. We engaged 23 HSI leaders, specifically academic advising leaders, with 5 objectives in mind for this study. 1, to understand the purpose of academic advising within their HSIs. 2, discover models of academic advising at HSIs. 3, classify these advising approaches that HSIs apply. 4, identify key academic advising populations at HSIs. And then 5, learn of the social media platforms HSIs leverage to engage their student population and their families. Next slide, please. Through our qualitative design, we engage participants in an open-ended questionnaire. The open-ended questionnaire asks academic advising leadership at HSIs to answer questions around advising models, advising structures, as well as advisor competencies, faculty advisor competencies, duties, trainings, assessment, technology, and communication. Yes, it was quite a lengthy questionnaire, but we were happy to gather this data and analyze it as a whole set. We used thematic analysis to identify codes across the responses, and then, of course, organize those codes into categories and themes, which gets us to our research findings for today. Next slide, please. Our report is entitled Construir el Camino, How Hispanic Serving Institutions Design and Deliver Academic Advising. Our key message from this report illustrates that HSIs drive student success through strategic and personalized academic advising approaches. They embrace diverse models and organizational structures and approaches to support their students, ensuring that their students receive not just timely support, but what is needed, while offering students and key insights and other institutions' insights to enhance their academic advising experiences. Let's dive into some of the findings to see what you can learn, as well as what we can discuss later on today. Next slide, please. As shared earlier, HSIs in particular see academic advising as not just a practice, but a strategy. With that in mind, the strategic purpose of academic advising is very much focused on embracing advising as a key strategy, guiding student success and academics, while also fostering a sense of belonging, familia, and contributing to the overall growth and learning of a student. So therefore, when we looked at the data, 5 areas emerge as a purpose for academic advising. The first 2 are perhaps not so surprising, as they're well documented within the literature. Guiding course registration, of course, is the first one that emerged within the research. We know that academic advisors play a critical function in ensuring that students receive not only the right courses, but in tracking their course enrollment to ensure that students are actively taking the courses that are on their degree plan. We also know that academic advising gets to the second point, which is enhancing student retention and completion. We know that advisors at HSIs, based off of previous research, that they are monitoring student progress towards graduation, and that they are ensuring students are not only taking the courses they need to succeed, but also offering timely support along the way. These 2, again, very well documented in the academic advising literature as a whole. These latter three, though, I think are incredibly unique to the HSI experience. Specifically, the first one, fostering a sense of belonging. Academic advisors at HSIs are called not just to enroll and to ensure students are completing, but they're also ensuring that students feel connected to the institution, ensuring that academic advisors are not only serving as an advisor and as a mentor, but also ensuring that students along the way have opportunities to engage with themselves and with the greater campus community. Fourth, and perhaps just as important, is advising is a learning function at HSIs. Advising promotes student learning and growth and development at HSIs. We recognize that HSIs may as a whole be teaching students not only how to manage their time, understanding how to address and have communications with their faculty, offering coaching and intervention support to ensure that students acquire not just the skills, but they develop their skills to make stronger connections with the campus community as they learn more about themselves and the greater institution as a whole to ensure their success. And then fifth, we also see Familia at the core of the HSI advising experience. Familia advisors play a critical role in that, in not only drawing on that cultural connection, but ensuring students that have a sense of security, have a sense of belonging, and growth opportunities through their Familia connections, through their advisor and the greater campus community. Next slide, please. When we look at advising and we see that the advising experience is intended with five primary functions in mind, purposes in mind, the question began, well, how are HSIs organizing themselves at the organizational level to support their students and their advisors for that matter? And we learned that HSI deployed a range of models, delivering personalized and effective support tailored to not only each student needs, but to the advisor's needs and to the college's needs. We see three models which were reflected in the literature: shared models, centralized models, and decentralized models. The majority of advising leaders in this study identified a shared model as the approach. I believe it was, I say the majority in the sense of 40%, 50%-ish, identified a shared model of advising, which articulates that both professional academic advisors as well as faculty academic advisors, sharing the advising responsibilities of their students on their respective campus. A satellite model was identified. That satellite model indicates that maybe a group of academic advisors see a particular student population while the majority of advising happens within the colleges themselves, or a dual model of advising where academic advising is scheduled by students on their campus with professional academic advisors in the first 2 years and faculty advisors in the second 2 years. Centralized models of advising also came up, where advising happens with professional academic advisors from onboarding to offboarding throughout the student's undergraduate experience. And then finally, we see decentralized advising, where academic advisors are housed within the respective colleges to ensure that all students receive what they need to receive, but they're all decentralized in the sense that the institutions, colleges manages the advising experience independent of an institutional or centralized structure. With these models, you begin seeing not just the vital role that faculty and academic advisors play in the success of students, but you also see the vital role of ensuring that students receive the support that they need from beginning to end. Next slide, please. So the question began, well, if this is how organizations are, or how HSIs are organizing their advising efforts, what are their approaches? How are they practicing academic advising? What approach best reflects their efforts? And what we learned, it's not just one approach. HSIs are using multiple approaches to advise their students in an advising session. We see that HSIs apply various approaches to actively boost student motivation as well as success, ensuring a consistent guidance experience throughout the student's academic journey. We see these four come up to the surface, and these are very strong that came up to the surface. First is proactive and intrusive advising. We see proactive advising to provide timely communication, timely intervention, and timely support for their students, often targeted support to ensure that students receive the support they need before issues come up as a collective. They may be addressing barriers, they may be removing barriers, they may be addressing something before it becomes a problem. That intrusive or proactive approach ensures that students are receiving that timely outreach for their success. We also see prescriptive advising, more of that transactional experience where advisors are providing on-the-spot course recommendation. It's a I'm going to share with you what you need to do experience for students. We see that perhaps because we know, at least in this model, in this study, we know the advising ratios are high. So prescriptive advising seems to be a manner in which they can do their best to meet all student needs, while at the same time ensuring that the workflow is addressed. We also have two other areas that came up, developmental advising as well as appreciative advising that came up in the study. Developmental advising very much focused on academic, personal, and career goals for their students, while appreciative advising allowed for more of a strength-based appreciative inquiry approach to the advising experience, offering not just developmental, but providing questions and opportunities for students to reflect upon their strengths, their talents, and their skill sets, as well as their lived experiences to inform not only their educational journey, but the future of achieving their goals while at the institution. These four approaches suggest that HSIs and advisors at HSIs use these during an advising session to not just meet a student where they are, but meet a student as they are when they enter the doors of the advising center or the advisor's office. So who are they advising? That became the next question. So next slide, please. Key student populations. Well, we knew that in the study, based off of the data, that the majority of HSIs required advising for all students on their campus. And that is a wonderful and lovely experience for those students. But there were a handful of academic advisors and HSIs in the study who said, while academic advising is open to all students, not every student is required to come in for academic advising. So they had key populations that they were targeting, given not only their resources, but their time, to ensure that these students receive timely intervention, timely support, and guidance throughout their first, second, third year, whatever that may be. So the first population that came up in this conversation were probation and suspension students. This population was at the top of the list, as the HSIs often felt that this population required timely support, timely interventions, timely resources, as well as guidance and mentorship from academic advisors or success coaches to ensure that these students not only received not only the information they needed to be successful, whether that's understanding institutional policy, calculating their GPA to understand what grades they needed to earn in a particular semester to achieve academic standing at that 2.0 or higher, but also ensure that a student understand the program of study as well as the institutional resources needed to support their journey along the way. First-year students were the second group of students that popped up in our conversation. This comes as no surprise, as we know the first-year population, given the research, is very much a population that when we invest in, we see greater outcomes on retention and student success efforts. So first-year students were at the core of the advising experience. Third, student athletes. NCAA naturally requires student athletes to be advised to ensure that not only are they making progress towards graduation, but ensuring that they stay in compliance with NCAA regulations. Fourth, transfer students. We know that a lot of our students, specifically Latino students, register in community colleges and make that transfer to a four-year institution. HSIs are incredibly cognizant of that, along with other institutions, in ensuring that students receive mandatory advising when they transfer from one institution to the next to ensure that not only their courses are transferring appropriately, but also ensuring that those degree applicable courses are making it to their program of study and that they are receiving credit towards their program of study. And then fifth, and perhaps not surprisingly, are graduating seniors. Given the responsibilities and duties of academic advisors that we see in the literature, progress towards graduation is one of the duties that we begin seeing at HSIs. Academic advisors are monitoring that progress of a student. So therefore, at the end of those 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, those completion years, graduating seniors are an essential population that are seen by academic advisors to make sure all the boxes are checked, all of their programs of study requirements are met, and that they're able to walk that day of graduation and celebrate with their family. So speaking of families and students, how are HSIs communicating with their student populations on campus? Next slide, please. We really had the opportunity to ask how HSIs are leveraging social media in this digital age. We now know that HSIs are leveraging social media platforms to keep not just students, but their families informed and engaged with critical advising information. Not surprisingly, 4 platforms rose to the top: Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, formerly or now known as X. Twitter during the study, but X now. Instagram was leveraged to provide wonderful information, site information, location information, advertising of events, provide quick general information for families to engage with. YouTube was leveraged as a platform for tutorials, resources, how-to guides along the ways, so that families and students had information on what steps they could take and the steps they needed to take by showing and demonstrating students how to register, how to sign up for courses, how to sign up for an advising appointment, etc. Facebook, if we can say, as a traditional social media, the original OG, if you will, Facebook was used to engage families and provide announcements, provide events, and provide opportunities for families to engage in critical advising information for their students. Information was both presented in English as well as in Spanish. That was specifically noted for Facebook. Twitter was used for those real-time, immediate, up-to-date, quick information updates that students needed to know. It was that quick reminder, registration starts tomorrow. It was that quick reminder, your deadline for submitting your course withdrawal form is today. Those quick announcements is really what Twitter was leveraged for, to provide students that real-time update on information. So we now know from these findings that HSIs are arguably very intentional in providing academic advising experiences for their students. So what are some lessons learned? Next slide, please. We have some consejos that we can get from here from HSIs. First, we know we can learn that we can be open to new social media platforms to communicate with advisees and families. The four platforms that we noticed that we came up, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, are all wonderful platforms. But we also know that those are where a lot of our millennial students reside at the moment. And as we experience Gen Z and Gen Alpha coming up in the years to come, they are on platforms that are not those platforms of a traditional nature. They are on Snapchat, they are on TikTok, they are now on LinkedIn. Those are platforms that provide opportunities that were identified by HSIs, but provide greater opportunities for investment into those platforms for communicating with students and families in the future. Second, please note that not every advisee requires mandatory advising. HSIs have been strategic in their use of their advising resources through their work. So they recognize that yes, academic advising is open to all students, but they've only required select populations. Populations got identified by data to ensure academic advising is received by those populations, and that a timely outreach and support is provided to those students. A strategic use of resource for institutions that are often underfunded is critical and creative to see that work at play. Third, HSIs are mindful that academic advising is more than course enrollment. We know that HSI see academic advising as a strategy for multiple ventures, including sense of belonging, familia environments, as well as learning growth and development for their students. Embracing that concept shows that academic advising has an impact not just beyond course registration, but to student success in a more holistic and intentional manner. Next slide, please. Fourth, as I shared previously, HSI see that academic advising is part of the learning core. Learning is a core function of academic advising. And you see that not only demonstrated as a strategy, but you also see that demonstrated in their advising approaches. We see prescriptive, proactive, developmental, and appreciative approaches reflecting not just behaviorist models of academic advising, but constructivist learning models of academic advising that show that academic advising plays a critical learning function at the institution. You also see that specifically when you look at those populations that are required for advising. First-year students, where opportunities present themselves to teach students about their course requirements, where opportunities present themselves for ensuring that student athletes know their NCAA requirements, where transfer students know what opportunities exist for not only transferring their credit, but learning opportunities that may be coming their way as a result of their institutional transfer. All of those are reflective of the learning experience and the learning function of academic advising within HSIs. And then fifth, we know we should be more conscious that shared models of advising require training of faculty advisors as well. The majority of the institutions in the study articulated that yes, they have a shared model of advising. However, in the conversations, we also noted that academic advisors were the ones that were most likely to receive training. Faculty advisors present an opportunity in a population within HSIs to provide more meaningful and intentional training so that they may support their students along their educational journey. And last but certainly not least, we've seen that these institutions have not only embedded themselves to have an intentional function in actively serving their students, but we also see them embracing a commitment to a servingness philosophy. Borrowing from Dr. Jenny Garcia's work, that servingness philosophy informs the efforts of academic advising at their institution, providing not only ensuring that the Latino students, but all students are receiving what they need to support themselves along the way to graduation, and hopefully post-graduation success. Next slide, please. Thank you all for that lovely presentation. With that said, we will segue into our panelist discussion. Again, if you have questions for our panelists, please feel free to include your question in the Q&A section below. Bringing up my questions here for the group. So let's just transition right on in. So to start our discussion, I thought we could delve into the core of how HSIs embed academic advising within the broader mission of fostering a sense of belonging, as well as familia among students. Lena, I'd like to start with you. How do you see HSIs integrate academic advising into the broader mission of fostering a stronger sense of belonging and family among students? Can you share an example of how the sense of community impacts academic advising experiences for students and student success?
Thank you, Gabe. Academic advising is embedded into the mission of Hispanic serving institutions. And aside from fulfilling the educational mission of learning, the welcoming and affirming aspects foster a strong sense of belonging among students. The holistic view of the student, along with the focus of the assets that students bring with them, the strengths, their cultural wealth, they have all of that. They have a great impact on the advising experience. Students are in a place where their identities are validated and celebrated. They're in community with their peers, faculty, staff who share their stories and work as a support circle and inspiration for students. And I see that from experience, seeing students coming even during open house sessions, even before they start at the university or college. They have that sense of meeting people, connecting with people. At orientation, they get connected with the advisors who schedule the classes for fall semester, and they have that positive image and experience that they feel connected even before they start. So that's really powerful.
Thank you so much, Lena. I very much appreciate what you said about validating the experiences of your students and those families as they enter the institution. Nicole, I'd like to transition to you very quickly. As building upon what Lena just said and along the same veins of that sense of belonging and recognizing the cultural values such as family, in what ways do you see HSIs integrating those cultural values into their advising practices to strengthen the connection, not just between the student and the institution and the advisor, but between the student, the families, the institution, and their advisor?
Thank you, Gabe. I think including families, students, the university, it's all interconnected and they all form a pillar of helping the students become successful, right? We come in as our own identities and this is who we are, and I am learning and I am engaging and I am providing and sharing. So the institution is there to support my academic knowledge and to be better, but my family is also support and they should be included because they are a part of me, right? So we have to validate that from the students. I see the University of Arizona, we are very committed to our community. I think we know that the university belongs to the community and the community loves University of Arizona. So we do a lot of cultural events that include families, from like translating documents, translating interfaces in some of our communication models where if a parent has guest access, they can't see those documentations or those words that are now translated. We have a resource center with the Cultural Center that includes a lot of our traditions. Yes, we are on the border town of, or close to the border of Mexico, but we celebrate all of the Latino heritage. And they have the abuelitas, who are a group of women that come together and they make food for our students at the resource center. They try to bring a little bit about themselves, and especially for those students that are coming from far away and they feel that need to belong, and that sense, that little thing that makes them feel like home. We have a Latinx Staff and Faculty Association, where we welcome all faculty and staff to be part of this community. They celebrate us. We just had a game on Saturday. We had a tailgating event, and they included our families. So they see the whole of us, not just the employee and our titles, right? So as they see us, we should see our students, and our students come in with families. They come in with maybe they're the first generation, maybe they're the example of the family, and we want to be able to provide that source of encouragement for the whole entire support team. And like my colleague Nina said earlier, we have to make our institutions a place where students are validated and included and welcomed in all aspects and spaces of campuses.
Thank you, Nicole. I appreciate your thoughts on how the institution, how the HSI belongs to the community, right? And how the community embraces that. And the community needs to see itself in the HSI as they go through. And that's showing up with your family as well, right? And so that they too can bring their families with them to those campus engagements and those opportunities that exist for not just the student, but for the family as a collective. As we shift a little bit, the report talked a lot about the approaches to academic advising. As you consider the families, as you consider, the students, the institution, the approaches that were mentioned were very much focused on, proactive, intrusive, prescriptive, developmental, and appreciative advising efforts. All wonderful efforts. But naturally, there's a cultural link there that's got to be considered as we do this practice. So, John, I'm going to shift to you real quick. How do HSIs ensure that families are involved in those advising experiences and those approaches? And how is the cultural link represented and maintained between the four parties of the family, the student, the institution, and the advisor?
That's a great question, Gabe. And I think this is one instance where I would say what HSIs need to do is what all our institutions really need to do around partnering with families, the advisors, student institutions in general moving forward. And that is helping folks understand what exactly advising is and the role advising plays on campus. I can give you some very specific examples. At one of my previous institutions in the state of Washington, we separated our family orientation from our student orientation. And what we realized is students were in a different place in terms of what they wanted to do, in terms of building community, understanding what the college experience was going to be like. That was an emerging HSI that I was at. And so we did that work with the students. The families, however, we realized we never, prior to us redoing our orientation and advising, we never actually talked to them what it meant to go to a regional comprehensive university and what the role of advising is. And so we spent a lot of time working actually with the institution, our state higher ed organization, and some local nonprofits. There were some guides. They were actually Washington State guides for, one was called On the Call Ride Home. The other one was called A Parent and Family Guide, and they were in multiple languages. We were an emerging HSI, so we used the Spanish version, but there were a number of different ones. And the purpose of those guides were really to help parents, especially first-generation parents, parents of first-generation students, to really understand, well, what does it mean to go to college? What is the role of the advisor? How can I be engaged? And for some of it, it was as simple as saying, what does it mean to go to a semester school versus a quarter school? And what is the role of a college dean versus an advisor and faculty and staff? And I think just that basic understanding of what it means to quote unquote go to college, I think was very informative to our families. The next step was to then, here at Colorado State University Pueblo, we've gotten, you have to quick shout out for the Department of Education's post-secondary unit, our program officer, Namika, is here with us, and they've funded us and our partner institutions, Fort Collins and Global, to really look at how are we embedding servingness into our advising process and into our community. So a lot of what Nicole and Lena were saying, and so part of that also involves us really thinking strategically, not just about what is the role of advising, but how is our institution viewed in the local community? We're a rural serving institution, and so we're one of the major metropolitan hubs in the area. So part of that framing of the conversation around the role of advising and families is also that of the institution. So for us, we can't separate those two things. Those are connected. And so a lot of it is also working with our faculty to ask them, what does servingness look like when you're advising or mentoring a student? We use those terms interchangeably sometimes, but we know those are two different things. And again, how do we engage that process for supporting our students through professional development and again through the not just marketing, but the building of community with our families.
I love that. I love the idea of asking, how does servingness look like in academic advising? The idea of not just of recognizing that, you know, the institution has a role in shaping the perception of how the community sees itself and how the family see themselves, echoing what Nicole mentioned as well. And I also really appreciate offering some education to families as well. You know, we know that students really don't, for the most part, know what an advisor is when they walk on a college campus. The closest thing that they've experienced is a counselor at their high school, right? So articulating what that role is, and then of course partnering with families as at the core of what servingness could look like, right? When you're thinking about that in the broader scheme. John, you also brought up something that I really thought was interesting, was the use of language. You talked about language as a function. Nicole, as you think about language, in what ways do you academic advisors at HSI incorporate, specifically in this case, Spanish, acknowledging the Latino population, into their advising practices to better connect and support their students and their families?
Thank you, Gabe. I think it's not just advisors. I think staff, community, faculty, everyone should be including some form of bilingualism in some format that they're trying to convey, right? So for example, the University of Arizona, or I mentioned earlier, we have translation of so many documents. We have bilingual meet and greet. So if parents want to come in and tour, they can do a Spanish guided tour. So they are aware, they know what's going on, and they understand that when we're going to the planetarium and they know what it's in Spanish, and the student can communicate with their parents what they're doing today. Our HSI was able to work with our financial aid office. And I mean, financial aid in itself, right? It's a very difficult topic. It's nerve-wracking, can cause anxiety for any parent. So we were able to translate some of that lexicon into Spanish so that parents are aware what awards or scholarships are, the difference and how we can apply for those. We have little buttons that we wear at events that say Hablo Español. We carry them, and parents are always stopping by and saying, oh, can I help you? ¿Me ayudas con una pregunta? Necesito buscar. So we're always there, happy to help them. I think as far as advising, and I can speak for myself, when I was a full-time advisor, I started working in the border town of Arizona and Mexico. So Spanish was it's as natural as putting on our shoes. It comes with us, it's innate, and we're not taking that away. So it was very important for me to incorporate that when I was working with my students. So when we talked about class enrollment, we talked about policy, we talked in English, we made sure that I made sure that they understood what was going on, and everything was cleared and there were no doubts or questions. And then just like that, we code switch and we turn into Spanish, and that's when we can form that relationship with our students. And, I'm talking to them about the last thing they mentioned when we saw each other. They were going to their abuelita's 90th birthday party, and how did that go? And they were going to go back home and visit the family, or their child was going to start kindergarten. How did that go? We have to understand that We often think in the scope of 18 to 24, but HSIs also, they work and for our post-traditional students, right? Some are parents. And we have to understand that and support that. I enjoyed speaking Spanish with my family. It's a way, again, validating and encouraging, making sure that the student feels welcome. There was always a safe space in my area. And I hope that many advisors incorporate that throughout their advising sessions if they can, or any language, right? Anything that makes the student feel validated.
Thank you, Nicole. I think the choice of language, the application and use of language in an advising session speaks to not just the cultural connections that exist, but obviously a personalized effort to meeting students as they are, right? Respecting the identity, respecting the culture, and the use of language is definitely one of those ways of meeting students as they are and offering that personalized advising experience or institutional experience for that matter. Thinking about personalization of the advising experiences, HSIs are known for offering personalized advising support for their students. Lena, can you share with us, can you discuss the practices, if you will, used to tailor academic advising to meet the individual needs of students, as well as how these practices contribute to the academic success of students at HSIs?
Certainly, Gabe. The first thing that comes to mind when thinking of this question is to create a strong affinity center on campus that will become the hub for that personalized support. And I can bring the example of my previous institution. We had an excellent Latinx center. Students formed an authentic community around the center, and also they got the opportunity to get the support to acclimate on campus, navigate campus, and develop contacts, create relationships. We had academic advisors, career counselors, mental health advisors, who most of them identified with the Hispanic or Latinx community, and they offered dropping hours at the center. So it was not only a hub for social events, it was also a learning hub for students. They felt comfortable in that environment and they saw these advisors, they connected with them. We also brought faculty and staff who identified with the community, and they offered their time to engage with students. And this whole circle, they didn't only provide resources for students, but they had fun. They had a great time through the social events and the discussion forums, and some field trips involved as well. And students felt a true sense of belonging in this community, and that contributed to their academic success. I would like to bring another example for students who live on campus, a living learning community for Latinx population. That was similarly as the Latinx Student Success Center. It provided students of a great environment of community, togetherness, belonging on campus. So they felt so comfortable with that. And they got so much an enriched experience. And with that, advising came very easy to them, because when you see faculty involved, when you see advisors going to their environment where students live, it's very impressive for them. We also had in my institution, we had faculty in residence, and those of them who were Hispanic or Latinx, you could see the connection there and how students craved those personalized conversations. Regardless if they had a class with them, they were very supportive. We organized some meals at the student cafeteria for them to discuss informally their struggles, their barriers, and also their successes. And they felt a lot more comfortable talking to faculty all together. So I think that was a very powerful space to create that connections aside from the class, outside of the classroom and the advising building.
Thank you, Lena. I really appreciate those tailored experiences of creating informal opportunities to advise, whether that's through a peer-to-peer network or through a mentor advisor functionality with the institution. I appreciated the importance of developing a sense of trust outside the formal academic setting that would ultimately inform the experience that students are having on their campuses. And then, of course, the more formal experiences that kind of function in both the informal and formal, such as living learning communities. Those are experiences that are intricately designed, right, to support students in and outside the classroom, right, and present wonderful opportunities for academic advisors to meet students where they are on campus, right? As well as faculty advisors. And I think that fourth thing that popped out to me was the idea of advisors creating networks for students, whether that's introducing them to faculty advisors so that they begin developing a network, developing relationships so that students feel more comfortable and competent in navigating the institution that is their home for the next X amount of years. So yeah. I want to do a quick transition, if you will, my friends, to faculty training, right? Alina, you brought up the idea of, Latinx Hub, having faculty come in, living learning communities, and I automatically thought about faculty advisors and the role that they play in student success. Let's discuss how HSIs prepare their faculty to be to be effective advisors. John, I'm going to come to you quickly. Faculty, how do HSIs encourage faculty advisors to adopt, for example, a holistic advising approach, right? That goes beyond just the academics, but to include more of that personable, familia, emotional support that we know not just Latino students, but all students could benefit from.
Yeah, this is always an interesting conversation. I'm also part of NACADA's Admin Institute and Summer Institute, where we talk a lot about faculty training as well. And, based on my experience there and the institution I've been at, I would say there's three things that HSIs and EHSIs, emerging HSIs, do really well. The ones that do it really well do a couple of things. So one is they actually do make a distinction between advising and mentoring. And in lieu of not having those distinctions, what they do have is conversations within faculty around what does advising, what does mentoring look like, and what does it mean to support our students within our individual context. So College State University Pueblo, I oversee the grad school, and so we primarily oversee master's students, but we also have 3+2, which are undergrads who are then pursuing master's degrees. I will tell you, I have met some amazing juniors and seniors doing PhD graduate level work in our biological sciences. Some of that is really due to the talent that we have, even though we're a rural HSI, but some of it also has to do with the mentorship that our faculty are giving our students. And some of them some are Latino and some are not, right? But what they have really done is really engage the students in not just advising and helping them make sure they take the right classes, but also providing mentorship around what is research? What does research look like at a small institution or a rural institution? And they share their experiences with them. And again, that's that aspect of understanding the difference between mentorship and advising. I think the second thing that institutions do really well when they talk about faculty training is providing faculty training. A lot of times we tend to separate advisors or even just professional admin staff from the training that we provide for faculty. A lot of it has to do with the contracts and when things start for faculty and how it's set up. But what we have found is when regardless of institution, when we would email faculty and say, hey, the advising center wants to do some training for you all, would you be interested? Overwhelmingly, the answer was like, yes. Yes, for everything from how do you use the early alert system? Yes to how do students transition to majors? And more importantly, they've asked for training around things like question, pursue, refer, QPR, suicide prevention, or what do you help a student in crisis? Not because our faculty are saying we need to do those things, we need to be a mental health counselor. No, what they're saying is we want to support our students, but we need to know how to use the referral system that we have on our campus. And that's what I would say is the third thing that HSIs are doing this well, is that they don't rely on just one area to support students. They're really connecting the advising center. So our PAC center, advising center, is connected to, and we have our advisors talk to our PAC cares, which is our like student crisis center. They talk to the faculty folks, trying to build those connections and that support network, and then really doing some work around what is happening in those respective areas. And that can be hard. From personal experience, I know that can be hard at a big institution, which is kind of why I'm glad at a smaller one, because we know everybody here, literally.
Thank you, John, for sharing those. I have those Cariño networks is what I call those, right? Those coordinated care networks. That level of organized Cariño is important, right? Having been a director of advising, I know how challenging that can be I was at a large institution as a director of advising trying to do that, and it has its opportunities and it certainly has its challenges. But you're right, that network of networking the advising center across the campus is critical. Also, offering that distinction between advising and mentoring. And I would add one more, counseling, right? I'm often asked, well, what's the difference between advising, counseling, coaching, and mentoring, right? There's this continuum that exists in the profession, right? So offering that clarity of role, I think, is really important. And then just providing the training. As simple as it sounds, the fact is we also know that our institutions, HSIs, are underfunded. And so choices are sometimes having to be made. But if you can provide that funding, and that provide that resource for faculty, it's invaluable, 100%. I know we are almost at time, so I'm going to shift a little bit to the conversation around servingness. All right. We talk a lot about in this report about embracing the idea of servingness as a philosophy in academic advising. Nicole, as you think about that concept of servingness, how does this philosophy of servingness influence the way advisors build the relationship with their students and tailor those advising experiences?
Thank you, Gabe. I think this is something that we really have to sit back and consider. Us as advisors, we are here to guide, teach, and demonstrate the essence of servingness to our students. So we have to kind of step back a little bit and be, what are our goals and what are the institution goals? And you really have to separate that, right? Because there's numbers and then there's servingness, I think. And then there's being true and honest to the student, serve them with empathy, honesty, and the highest level of dedication. So how do we get there? We have to train and we have to work together. I know that when we have academic advisors, we onboard academic advisors at the University of Arizona, we do a robust training of certain sessions, two of which include inclusive advising and then effective communication would kind of go hand in hand, right? Understanding where students are coming from. Dave, like you said earlier, meeting students as they are, including them, validating them, and then how do we communicate with them, right? How do we effectively communicate so that we both understand and are on the same page? And the same can go, I think, if you do faculty training. And this is where you also leverage those partnerships across campus. You know, if I'm working with a student and he or she are talking about going to the graduate school, you know, what can I do? How can I serve this student to be better prepared to apply for graduate school? We are at a junior level here, so who can I refer them to? Who can I send them to so that they can effectively guide them, right? Or is a case that they're really going straight into the workforce, and that's fine. So, you know, where can we send this student so that they can better prepare to answer those questions during interviews, to be prepared for cover letter and resume writing. So we have to leverage our campus partnerships to be able to fully and wholeheartedly serve these students.
Thank you, Nicole. I think you hit on a lot of key efforts of what, serving this means. You got to reflect on it as an institution. Arguably, at the same time, consider what your HSI identity means, right? In the construct and how advising functions within that identity, right? And that not just the philosophy, but the practice of, right, of serving this. Lena, as we kind of come to a close, as you think about what advice would you give an institution, an HSI, looking to shift from that traditional model of advising, if you will, to one centered around servingness and intentionality, right? We know that these HSIs in the study have embraced that idea of servingness, have embraced that idea of intentionality, recognizing they're leveraging key populations. They're leveraging communications with families. They see advising as a multi-layered approach, as a strategy to meet, student learning, create familial environments, etc. For those looking to shift to a more servingness and intentionality approach, what advice would you give an institution?
Thank you, Gabe. Before I get into the advising part, I'd like to see it strategically from an institutional perspective. I would say extend beyond the access and enrollment to higher education and provide a holistic student experience. Create those spaces for students where their intersecting identities are affirmed and valued. Develop student leadership and engagement opportunities meaningful for the students, and promote aspirations for advancement as a strategy. Now, if we go to the advising, in the advising realm, recognize the diversity of the students and be mindful that one academic advising model may not serve all students the same, or may not cover all the needs of students. Adopt a strengths-based advising approach like the appreciative advising or the developmental advising that you mentioned on your report. Those came up on your list. And those approaches will create the positive and meaningful relationships between the advisor and the student. Also consider the assets that students bring with them on campus and how we can help them navigate campus and be successful using those strengths. And it's a very, it's not an easy job for an advisor, but they can totally identify those strengths of the students in those advising sessions, in those conversations with the students. One last advice, I would say, take advantage of the student support circle. Who is on the support circle of the student, inside and outside of campus? Outside of campus, who their families are, the friends, the community, what kind of support they get from them, and use all that information. And also inside the campus, peer and cultural groups, they're involved, mentors. Students do mention, I belong to this club and I enjoy this and that. All that information is pretty useful and it serves advising very well.
Thank you, Lena. I appreciate the meeting students as they are through the advising approaches, as well as through the cultural lens that they bring. I appreciate also the idea of adopting the support network that exists, right? Not cutting the student off from that support network, but leveraging that opportunity that exists with connecting students on their campus, as well as the families that support them through and through. I have one last question before we make our way to the Q&A, and this is for John. As we look ahead, how do you see the role of advising evolving at HSIs, right? And what emerging trends or practices should other institutions be aware of to better support their students along their journey?
Some of the trends that we're seeing a lot is this focus on holistic advising, particularly when it intersects with things like guided pathways. And how does that look like? How do you help students make educated decisions early on? And how are we making the connections for them moving forward? I think that's one of those questions that for HSIs, I think are going to be very interesting, because a lot of HSIs, especially and folks can go read your report, a lot of them are community colleges or rural serving. And the challenge with those institutions is they provide more than just 4-year degrees. They also provide associate degrees, concurrent enrollment. They're doing a lot of work in the community. And so while guided pathways is a great practice that happens at R1s a lot, if you're at a smaller institution, how does concurrent enrollment, how does the associate degrees give out, how does the technical skill building that we may provide? For the longest time, we've had several programs that are helping students build skills, technical skills we would consider like trade skills, because that's what our students look for. How does that fit within that process? And so how are we working with our families? And I think that's this is what I'm going to say next is really important. A lot of our families, a lot of the issues our students are coming in with is for a lot of the students, they got to make a choice between, now that I'm 18 and I'm out of high school, do I go to work so I can help support my family who helped me through school? Do I support them now? Or, and I think this is really what our students are telling us, or do I take the chance of pursuing higher education, an associate's degree, 4-year degree, that may not turn into something because of everything I'm hearing in the media, right? Now, I work in higher ed. I believe in higher education, in degree pursuit. However, that is a real choice that some of our students have to face. So again, having that conversation, how do we engage in that conversation with our families during visit days? And really advising is perfectly situated to have those kinds of discussion with folks, I think is really critical. I'd say the other kind of innovation in advising that needs to be considered now for HSIs, in particular, and emerging HSIs, is yes, the use of things like artificial intelligence, the use of technology in advising, but understanding that technology and that use is situated in socioeconomics. And so we may have a really wonderful AI bot that could probably give recommendations on classes, but if I'm a primary Spanish speaker, or my family is, and I'm trying to explain these things, and those tools aren't catered for my community, they may not be as effective. And so as institutions think about using technology, they do have to take an equity lens with that and say, now, how will this impact our Latino students, our other ethnicities that we may have, or other non-English speaking or primarily speaking communities? How is this use of this uptake of this technology going to impact those as well? And I think those are two really big things that we're talking about kind of in the advising space.
Thank you, Dr. Vasquez. I appreciate that. Yes, the use of AI, I've written on that topic, not to do a plug, but yeah, I've talked about AI advising and what that looks like. I've also agree with you in the sense of that's got to be within the social economic context as well as the cultural context, right? As we leverage those tools in the advising space and at the institution level, what does that look like, right? Recognizing to what Lena said, we have a diverse population, and Nicole mentioned the post-traditional population as well. We've got to be able to meet them as they are, right? And so we've got to embrace technologies that apply that equity lens, right? And supporting their students. And then of course, meeting families, right? The reality is, our students have lives outside the campus walls, right? And those lives impact their day-to-day, right? It is no longer school compartmentalized from family. It is interconnected and interdependent, right? We've got to be able to have those conversations. Some may be easy, some may be more difficult conversations, but they're worth having. If we're getting to that level of that philosophy of servingness and we're acting it out and we're and doing it authentically, then yeah, we've got to have those conversations in a more meaningful way. Round of applause to everybody, please. Show them your love for serving as panelists today. I very much appreciated the conversation and the discussion. Thank you all so much. In the time we have left, if you'd be kind enough to join me for the Q&A portion, I'd appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. That was absolutely wonderful. And we are really excited to have questions from the audience. If you haven't put a question in, please put one in, but we do have a bunch. And whoever would like to answer, please feel free. Just like give the wave or something. Okay, the first question is, what have you learned about advising for students in the military or veterans? All right, let's hear it, John.
Yeah, one of my peers in one of my peers institutions, I was Associate Dean of Access and Equity, so I oversaw military and veterans department. And I think what's really critical about advising students in military and veterans is understanding what your institution's specific role is and how it's set up to serve students. So my previous institution, our Veterans Center was both the center that looked at the financial piece with the GI Bill and everything in terms of monitoring students' classes and making sure that they were eligible, but then also providing the academic advising support for the students. And so because they were under me, we could also connect them to the advising center and really create a good community there. That's really important because in some places that you know, that eligibility aspect of the GI Bill and whatnot is sometimes under financial aid. And so it's nowhere near the advising service space. And so I think it's really critical to make sure that those connections are built. I think for here at Colorado State University Pueblo, one of the things I'm really excited about is I've got one of my student success coaches at the grad school is actually a veteran. And so one of the things our funding from the Department of Ed is helping us do is he's going to actually do focus groups with student veterans around what does servingness mean for them and what does it mean to be, you know, when they came to school here at Pueblo, what does it mean that you're coming to an HSI, even though that may not be your identity? And so we're really excited about the future in terms of what we can share, what our veteran students say about what it means to attend an HSI. So maybe there'll be a part 2 in a year with Gabe here. So.
Thank you. Thank you. Does anyone else want to comment on that at all? Just want to ask. If you're
I'll
good.
echo that. Like we
Oh,
do,
yeah.
in my experience, I've seen financial aid really take over the GI component. I'll echo that a lot. But I've also seen veterans offices physically next to the financial aid office, like on campus. This happened at a couple of institutions that I've worked at, where the financial aid office is right next to the veteran services and military services office. That is, of course, by design, but the veterans office always reached out to the advising center, right? And so there was always a level of a need to kind of do some intentional coordination between the offices, and specifically identify those students so advisors knew when they walked in, this is a veteran student, and they would be tagged in the system, whether that was through our EAB technology or Starfish technology. They were tagged so an advisor would know when they walked in, this student has a GI Bill, this student has this type of financial aid support. Therefore, we need to be mindful of how we're communicating with this student with regard to the requirements of their to maintain their GI Bill, and at the same time ensuring that we're keeping their office, the Military and Veteran Services office, in the communication loop, right? So those were essential components.
Thank you. Thank you. Here's another question. How do you build close relationships with students when they are not assigned an advisor, other than helping students feel trust and be comfortable around the advisor, especially at such a large institution? And this person is at my institution at Rutgers. What do you do? How can you build trust and build closer relationships when you're at a large institution?
I'll give that one a shot. I've worked at 2 large institutions, and one of them had no assigned advisors at that institution. One of the challenges there was, of course, finding that connection for our students. Honestly, we unofficially assigned. That was what we did. We unofficially assigned students. Just because they're not assigned to you doesn't mean the advising center can't do, or the advisor can't do outreach. You can do outreach, send them an email, send them a text, check in on them, right? I've always told my students, here are 5 ways you can communicate me. You can send me an email, you can send me a text, you can stop by the office, you can send me a message on LinkedIn, or you can send me a message in Messenger. I always gave them multiple ways to communicate with me so they would know they had access to me within a reasonable set of time, right? A set of hours in the day. And I would encourage my team of advisors to do that outreach. If you know a student, check in with them, right? That's okay. You can do that that informal or formal, if you want to call it, outreach to the students so they feel connected. And I've also said, here's ways to schedule an appointment with me if you have questions about your progress towards degree. And we can walk through what that looks like. So I always had like a Google meetup of some kind that students could drop in with. I always said you had walk-in times that you could come and see me during these hours. I always, said, hey, during lunch, I'm at the student union, stop by for an informal conversation, right? Giving them multiple ways to have conversations with me was the other way that we did some of that to ensure that students felt connected, but also had a person that they could trust along the way.
I'd like
Great.
to add something
Sure.
if possible.
Mhm.
I think it's really important at this time where advisors need to really put on their advocacy hat and realize, understand why the student was not assigned an advisor. It could be a multitude of things, but there's a glitch in the system. How is your advising or your university structured in advising? Is it centralized, decentralized? Is there a person that can assist the student? For example, we are decentralized, so I wouldn't send a student who doesn't have an advisor, who is a psychology advisor. I wouldn't send them to like an engineering advisor. They're just two different topics. And, you know, gen eds and everything, sciences, maths, all that come into play. So I think this is where we have to really advocate, know our campus partners, reach out, and then still be there for the student, but try to see what we can do to support them as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so here's another one. Please explain the core differences between faculty academic advising and program academic advising. And that is something that I hear all the time. So can you explain the differences? Hey, John.
Yeah, go ahead, John. I'll come back to you.
I was gonna say, I don't know if, yeah, so this is really what I love my current job, because this is very clear for us at the graduate level, but it also happens undergrad. So faculty academic advisors really traditionally will work with things like academic planning, advising on their schedules, making sure choices, other activities, really help talk about career goals, helping students in their identify good topics for co-ops or projects that they might want to do, that kind of stuff. They're really working one-on-one with their students, with an individual student or a group of students. You can think of it as in a PhD program, it's my faculty advisor. When I did my PhD, I had a faculty advisor, but then we also had a program advisor, and the program advisor, and we also have this in undergrad as well. They are really focused on the program requirements to stay good in the program, right? So they're typically the individuals who are helping the faculty advisors clarify program requirements, policies, procedures. If a student is not academic good standing or is in warning, program advisors, the way I've worked with them and the way I've seen them, will let a faculty advisor know, hey, this student is, the student is in warning, or it looks like they're on the line, you should talk to them. And in many cases, they work together to ensure that the student, if they're needing to be referred to outside the program, it's the program advisors that sometimes have those connections outside. They're facilitating relationships between students and other people on campus, checking the academic standards. Now, there can be some squishiness sometimes between the way folks go. Again, it has to also do with the culture of the institution and kind of how the programs are set up. And so it's not strictly one or the other, but for me, I found those to be a really effective way of faculty working together to support students.
Yeah,
Thank
I'll
Dave?
echo that as well. When I think about faculty advisors, a lot of that at the undergraduate level, and I always think about how advising in some ways should be, because for me, the graduate level is for me what should be at the undergraduate level is my preference. But we know that that doesn't always make its way down. So when I think about faculty advising, it's the faculty mentor component, typically within the specific academic department, that's providing, a level of advising and expertise on a subject matter or a discipline. That relationship can be very much, career focused, mentorship focused, pathway focused of, next steps in as far as a professional. They're cultivating that professional identity, that professional career of that student, whether that's through, undergraduate research opportunities, or that's through graduate school preparation, or career advice along the ways. Again, that mentor-mentee relationship is really at the core of that faculty advisor experience. When I think about the programmatic advising experience, that background is really thinking of academic advisors themselves, often in the center, or maybe in an academic department in some cases, if it's a decentralized model. And their focus is really on what I call moving the chess pieces, the gen ed requirements, understanding institutional policies, understanding electives, and how all of those components, and then some, financial aid, SAP, GI, NCAA, all of those chess pieces interconnect to get to the other side of the board, right? And helping a student navigate their educational experience. So advisors in that case tend to have a larger caseload of students. They're seeing them and they're monitoring their academic progress along their way. They're really focused on the academic planning, the retention, and the success in a more holistic manner.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, we've got time for a couple more. Okay, here's a long one, so listen closely. In the context of a polytechnic university like NJIT in New Jersey, like New Jersey Institute for Technology, where students often engage with a highly technical and project-based curriculum, what strategies do you find most effective in advising students to not only succeed academically, but also develop a balanced skill set that includes soft skills like communication, teamwork, and leadership? And how can we as advisors better support them? What do you think?
That's a great one. Um, I think early on, there's a lot of conversations in advising about integrating career advising into practice. So for me, that's like kind of just integrating that career development early, encouraging students to view their academic journey as part of their broader career development. So advisors can help in the career goals conversations early and identify how both the technical skills and soft skills are preparing them for that long-term success. Um, I also think about how academic advisors can, in facilitating the learning experience of like helping students unpack those multidisciplinary projects. You know, what did you learn from through this lens of a project, whether that's through chemistry or through engineering? You know, as you're learning through these multidisciplinary projects, help a student unpack and reflect in those conversations. I think goes a long way in helping students not only understand their role and understanding the content, but drawing upon those technical and non-technical fields to articulate their learning experiences and how it's evolved, and how it's contributed to the diversity of working in teams, different viewpoints, as well as those non-technical challenges they experienced in that project. Um, the third thing I would say is extracurricular involvement, encouraging students as part of their experience on campus to get involved in student organizations, get involved in clubs, and seek out those leadership roles that complement the curriculum and prepare them for career success after graduation. I think those are really good opportunities that an academic advisor can incorporate into the degree program, into the degree pathway for students. Um, and I would say like the last thing that sort of comes to mind is if there are opportunities, and again, this could look different from institution to institution, but incorporating or collaborating with faculty and industry, right? Creating those connections. Sometimes that could be a role that maybe goes above and beyond the role of an advisor, but maybe you're partnering with the faculty or the department to work with industry to make those connections with students while they're on the campus so they can have those opportunities to learn more about the project management in the industry, or get some opportunities to connect with members of the industry. They may also want to develop workshops that are preparing them for the industry, such as project management, teamwork, or communication, right? All of those can complement technical expertise for a student in a technical program. So that would be my 1 cent to that. So yeah.
You
All
covered
right.
all of them, Gabe, that I had in mind, but thank you for that, for sharing that. I also wanted to add, it's very important to give contacts to students and introduce them. I found that if you send an introductory email and connect the student with your contacts, it's very beneficial for them and they don't feel intimidating, just to contact that person themselves. But definitely the student involvement in clubs, groups, organizations, they can acquire those skills, and it will be a very fulfilling experience for them aside from success in their classes. And also useful for employers along the way.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we got time for one more, and this is a big one. So what strategies beyond email and text would you suggest to advisors who have large caseloads, so 400 to 450 students, on how to build relationships and have students engage with them and feel connected? And that the advisor isn't in a rush and just to get them to register, etc. So how do we engage them in a more meaningful way to talk about career goals and academic goals when you have such a huge caseload of students. Any last advice folks would have for individuals going through this?
Yeah, I'll chime in real quick. I think one of the lessons from HSIs that we're learning is how they're leveraging social media. And so that's leveraging not just how the institution and the advising department itself is using social media, but I think we know that this generation is online. And so encouraging academic advisors to perhaps set up a social media profile that, invites their students to follow them and connect with them in that way, in that digital and virtual space, is one way to develop that personal relationship as well as, build those connections with their students on campus, in and on and outside of campus, I think is a really good way. That's going beyond the traditional email and text message functionality. So I think social media has that opportunity there. I've also have had academic advisors create meet and greet sessions where they host them on campus somewhere where their caseload will stop by. It's just an informal, nice to meet you session. There's food, pizza, tell us about yourself. Not only does it provide an opportunity for the advisor to meet their students, in a informal setting, but it also presents an opportunity for the caseload to meet themselves as well, right? So they're building networks and connections for the students themselves along their way. And then I've also seen academic advisors do group advising as opposed to one-on-one advising. I've seen TSI in Texas, we have TSI advising. TSI, which is our developmental advising efforts, they've done group advising, right? Where they've had an opportunity to build community among their cohort, among their advising caseload, and at the same time able to meet students where they are and as they are along the way. So those would be 3 areas that I would suggest. Anybody else like to add anything to that?
I'm gonna move us forward because we only have a few more minutes. But Gabe, I thought that I know we wanted to put the resources in the chat, but is there anything that you'd like to say before I sort of close things up?
No, I would just like to say thank you so much for our panelists, for Lena, John, and Nicole. I loved our conversation today. Thank you for being a part of it. Thank you to everybody who came today. And yeah, we'll drop some resources in the chat. And thank you to the Rutgers Center for sponsoring this session, to Dr. Gassman and the whole team. Very much appreciate you. Thank y'all.
Absolutely. And just just in closing, I want to say thank you to all the attendees today. Thanks for the great questions. Thank you to Gabe and all of our panelists. And thank you for the work that you do every day. We appreciate you so much. And thanks for sharing your strategies. Thanks to our staff at the center for helping with this as well. And I just want everyone to know that we did record this event and we will be sending it to you along with a variety of other resources. So thank you so much for being with us today, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you, everybody. Take care.